Welcome to Book Nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. Don't believe everything you think. Why Your Thinking is the Beginning and End of Suffering by Joseph Nguyen begins from the simple but radical observation that our suffering doesn't come directly from the circumstances of our lives, but from the thoughts we generate about those circumstances. The author challenges one of the deepest assumptions most people carry, that our thoughts are accurate reflections of reality, and that if we think something intensely enough, it must be true. Nguyen gently but firmly unpacks this illusion, explaining that the mind's chatter is not only unreliable but also the root cause of the distress, anxiety, resentment, and despair we experience. Throughout the book, he offers a reorientation toward seeing thoughts for what they are: transient mental events, not necessarily truths, not necessarily reflective of who we are, and certainly not binding instructions we must obey. By learning to perceive this distinction, he argues, we can begin to free ourselves from the chains of suffering and discover a peace that was never really absent, only hidden by the noise of thought. The book is written in a tone that is both compassionate and deeply practical. Nguyen doesn't present himself as an aloof philosopher. Instead, he writes from the perspective of someone who has personally wrestled with his own mind and discovered insights that he insists are not esoteric but available to everyone. He emphasizes over and over that freedom doesn't come from controlling the external world, rearranging circumstances, or even from mastering one's thoughts through elaborate techniques. Freedom arises from a shift in perspective, the recognition that we are not our thoughts. This recognition might sound abstract at first, but through story, illustration, and analogy, he brings it to life. One of the central messages of the book is that the mind is a prolific storyteller, and most of its stories are unnecessary, repetitive, and riddled with distortion. If we examine carefully, we realize that much of our daily thinking is simply reruns of old worries, regrets, judgments, and predictions. We believe them because we've been conditioned to equate thinking with knowing. Nguyen pushes us to consider, what if much of what we think is not truth at all, but conditioned patterns arising from past experiences, culture, and fears? He notes how often people are trapped in cycles of worry, believing if they think hard enough they can prevent bad things from happening, or that if they mentally replay a painful memory, they can somehow undo it. But all this thinking only multiplies suffering. The past is gone, the future is not here, and the present is continually colored by the mind's commentary, so we rarely see life as it really is. To illustrate the illusory nature of thought, Nguyen uses simple analogies. Imagine the sky filled with clouds. Some clouds are dark and stormy, some are light and passing, but none of them is the sky itself. Our thoughts are like those clouds. They appear, change, and disappear, but they are not the essence of who we are. We are the awareness, the sky that holds them. Another analogy he offers is the movie screen. Thoughts are like images projected on a screen. They can be vivid, emotional, even terrifying, but the screen itself is untouched, unburned, unstained. Similarly, our true nature is untouched by thoughts, even the most painful ones. What creates suffering is not the thought itself but our identification with it, our belief that the image on the screen is who we are or that the storm in the sky defines the sky. This misidentification fuels anxiety, depression, and self-criticism. Nguyen reminds readers of everyday scenarios where this dynamic plays out. Consider someone who gets cut off in traffic. Instantly, a flood of angry thoughts arises. That person disrespected me. People are so selfish. This always happens to me. The body responds with tension, adrenaline, and frustration. Yet if we examine closely, the suffering did not come from the event of being cut off. It came from the story the mind spun around it. Another driver might not even react at all, perhaps even shrugging it off as meaningless. The difference is not the external event, but the thinking layered on top of it. In recognizing this, Nguyen highlights one of his most repeated points. It is never the external world that causes suffering, only our interpretation of it. This realization can feel liberating but also disorienting. If suffering is created by thought, does that mean we must stop thinking? Nguyen clarifies that the goal is not to control or eliminate thought, because thought is a natural function of the mind, just as the heart beats or the lungs breathe. The problem is not the existence of thought, but the unquestioned belief in thought. Just because the mind produces a sentence doesn't mean it's true, necessary, or helpful. By learning to notice thoughts without automatically fusing with them, we weaken their hold over us. Nguyen points out that the same mind that causes so much pain is also capable of extraordinary creativity, insight, and joy, but these qualities shine through only when we stop drowning in compulsive thinking. A pivotal theme in the book is the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable, it's part of life. We lose loved ones, we experience illness, we encounter failure. But suffering, Nguyen argues, is optional. Suffering arises when the mind resists pain, when it insists that things should be different than they are, when it replays hurts endlessly or projects fear into the future. For instance, physical pain from a headache may last a few hours, but the suffering from the mind's commentary, "This is unbearable, I'll never get better, why does this always happen to me?" can last much longer and feel heavier than the pain itself. The liberation Nguyen points toward is not an escape from pain, but a release from unnecessary suffering. Nguyen frequently returns to the idea of presence. In the present moment, without thought's distortions, there is usually little problem. Right now, if you check carefully, most of us are safe, breathing, alive. The problems that plague us, financial fears, relationship conflicts, anxieties about reputation, are usually projections of past or future in thought. He suggests that presence is not something we need to cultivate artificially, but something we naturally touch whenever we disengage from the mind's chatter. Have you ever been absorbed in a sunset, a piece of music, or a laugh with a child? In those moments, the mind quiets and the natural peace of awareness is revealed. That peace, Nguyen insists, is always available, it's only obscured by thought. One striking example he gives is the common experience of lying awake at night. The body is tired, but the mind is spinning, rehearsing conversations, worrying about tomorrow, reliving arguments. The suffering is not from the bed or the night itself, it is purely generated by thought. And when, eventually, the mind grows tired and you drift off, the suffering disappears instantly, even though nothing externally changed. This shows that peace was never absent, it was only hidden by the mental storm. By recognizing this, we begin to disarm the illusion that our well-being depends on controlling life circumstances. It depends only on seeing thought clearly. Nguyen also challenges the culture of self-improvement that tells us we must constantly fix ourselves, think positively, or master affirmations to be worthy. He calls this another subtle trap of thought. Trying to think positively is still believing in thought, it just dresses the prison in prettier colors. The deeper freedom comes not from replacing bad thoughts with good ones, but from realizing that none of them define us. The mind may say, "I am unworthy," and later it may say, "I am brilliant," but neither statement is who you truly are. You are the awareness that notices both. When we cling to positive thoughts, we set ourselves up to fear their disappearance. But when we see all thoughts as transient, we rest in something deeper and unshakable. Nguyen uses relatable stories to reinforce this. He recalls times when he was chasing success, believing that achieving certain milestones would bring lasting happiness. But each time he achieved something, the satisfaction was fleeting. Soon the mind generated new worries. What if I lose this? What's next? He realized that happiness was never in the achievement, but in the brief pause of thought's grasping when a desire was momentarily fulfilled. True peace, therefore, could not be found in chasing outcomes but in loosening the hold of thought itself. Practical guidance threads through the book. One simple but profound practice Nguyen emphasizes is noticing the space between thoughts. He encourages readers to try an experiment. Sit quietly and wait for your next thought. In that pause, before a thought arises, you taste pure awareness, calm, and presence. That space, he explains, is your true nature. It doesn't need fixing, doesn't need to become better, and cannot be harmed. Thoughts will inevitably return, but now you know they arise within a vast stillness that is never lost. With repetition, this shift in perspective becomes more natural. You stop believing every thought, and in that gap, suffering loses its fuel. Another practical tip is to question thoughts gently. Instead of automatically believing "I can't handle this," pause and ask, "Is this absolutely true? How do I feel when I believe this thought? Who would I be without it?" Often, we see that the thought is not fact but a habitual story. By questioning, we weaken its spell. Nguyen warns against turning this into another mental battle. The point is not to argue with thoughts, but to see their insubstantial nature. Like clouds, they pass when we stop holding on to them. Throughout the book, Nguyen emphasizes compassion for oneself. When readers realize how much suffering they've created through thought, it can be tempting to blame themselves. But he reminds us that no one chooses to be trapped in thought, it's simply conditioning. Recognizing it is already a step into freedom. And as we loosen identification with our own thoughts, we naturally become gentler with others, realizing that their hurtful actions too are driven by thoughts they are believing. This perspective cultivates empathy and patience, which ripple outward into relationships and communities. He gives the example of someone being insulted. Our instinct is to take the words personally and respond with anger. But if we see clearly, the insult is just words shaped by another person's thoughts, which arise from their conditioning, pain, and perspective. Realizing this, we can choose not to take the bait. The words lose their sting because we see they are not reflections of our worth, but projections of someone else's mind. This doesn't mean tolerating abuse, but it means freeing ourselves from unnecessary suffering by not internalizing another's thoughts. Nguyen also explores the illusion of control. We often believe that if we think hard enough, we can control outcomes and secure safety. But life is inherently uncertain. No amount of mental rehearsal prevents accidents, illness, or change. In fact, our attempts to control through obsessive thinking often make us more anxious. Surrendering control does not mean passivity, it means recognizing that life unfolds in ways beyond our mental grasp, and our peace does not depend on outcomes. We can still act, plan, and care, but without the burden of believing our safety depends on constant mental vigilance. Toward the later chapters, Nguyen underscores that enlightenment or awakening is not some distant mystical event but the simple recognition of what has always been true: we are not our thoughts. This recognition may come suddenly or gradually, but once glimpsed, it shifts everything. Suffering may still appear, but it no longer defines us. Pain may still arise, but it is met with space. The mind may still chatter, but we no longer mistake it for truth. In this way, freedom is available here and now, not after years of striving. One of his most powerful invitations is to stop seeking peace as if it were absent. He writes that peace is the natural state of awareness, revealed when thought quiets. Instead of chasing peace in achievements, relationships, or possessions, we can notice it underneath everything, even in ordinary moments. This realization can transform daily life. Washing dishes, walking, or even sitting in traffic can become moments of presence when freed from the commentary of thought. Life becomes lighter, less burdened, more vivid. The book closes with a reminder that the journey is not about becoming a better thinker or silencing the mind permanently. It's about waking up to what's already true, that thoughts are not reality, and believing them is the root of suffering. When we stop believing everything we think, we discover an unshakable peace that was always here. Nguyen calls readers to return again and again to this simple recognition. Each time a painful thought arises, we have a choice: to believe it and suffer, or to see it as a passing cloud in the sky of awareness. Over time, this choice becomes second nature, and suffering loosens its grip. By the end, Nguyen's message resonates with clarity and compassion. We don't need to fix ourselves, master every thought, or rearrange the world to be happy. We simply need to see thought for what it is: fleeting, conditioned, and not who we are. This shift doesn't eliminate life's challenges, but it changes our relationship to them entirely. Pain remains, but suffering dissolves. And in that dissolution, what shines through is the quiet joy of simply being alive here and now. And that's it. Don't Believe Everything You Think by Joseph Nguyen. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.